You stole my childhood. I'm taking your empire.
I spent 28 years believing I was Marcus Bennett, the disappointing younger son of a Connecticut shipping magnate. Turns out I was living someone else's lie the entire time, and discovering the truth didn't just change my life. It completely destroyed theirs. My supposed father, Gregory Bennett, built his reputation on inherited wealth and ruthless business tactics. At 60, he had silver hair he claimed came from business stress, though I suspect it was more about maintaining his distinguished appearance for board meetings. He could recite every vessel number in his fleet, but couldn't remember which sport I played in high school. Baseball, by the way. I pitched us to the state finals. We went all the way to championships. Not that he noticed or showed up to a single game. Catherine Bennett, my mother, was 55 and treated charity events like military operations, executing them with precision, ruthlessness, and zero tolerance for anything less than perfection. She had this way of introducing me at social gatherings as our younger son, Marcus, with a tone suggesting I was a tax write-off she reluctantly acknowledged for appearances. Her jewelry collection could fund a small country, but her affection toward me was cheaper than costume accessories. Her diamonds cost more than most people's houses, but her heart was worthless when it came to me. Then there was Trevor, my older brother by 18 months. 30 years old, Harvard Business School graduate, and everything our parents wanted wrapped up in one perfect package. The Connecticut mansion we lived in sprawled across 42 acres of manicured perfection with two distinct wings that might as well have been different universes. The East Wing belonged to Trevor, a shrine to achievement with floor-to-ceiling displays of trophies, academic awards, and photographs of him shaking hands with senators, CEOs, and even a former president at some youth leadership summit. The West Wing was mine, decorated with participation ribbons and team photos where you had to squint to find me in the back row, like I was background noise in my own life. Growing up in that house meant living in Trevor's shadow, except shadows are supposed to be dark and quiet, and Trevor's shadow was lit up like Times Square with constant celebration and praise. "Trevor, show Uncle Harrison your Harvard acceptance letter," Catherine would say at every family gathering, her perfectly manicured fingers adjusting his collar like he was a prize show dog. Her diamond rings caught the light with every gesture, throwing tiny rainbows across the room that seemed to land everywhere except on me. Then she'd glance my way with that practiced smile that never quite reached her eyes. "Marcus is still figuring things out. Some people just bloom later, don't they, dear?" Uncle Harrison would nod politely, but I caught the pity in his eyes, the same look you'd give a three-legged dog trying its best to keep up with the pack. He'd pat my shoulder and slip me a $20 bill like I was 12 instead of 28, probably thinking he was being kind to the family failure. I worked as a floor supervisor at one of our family's shipping warehouses in Newark, and not some cushy executive training position either, actual work. Real work that left me exhausted every night. 4:30 wake-ups every morning, my alarm screaming in the dark. I'd drive through the darkness to get there before the first shift started at 6, managing dock crews, loading freight, handling union negotiations over break schedules and overtime pay. My hands had permanent calluses that no amount of lotion could soften, and I knew every forklift operator by their first name and their family situations. When Carlos's daughter needed surgery he couldn't afford even with our company insurance, I knew about it and helped him navigate the paperwork. When Danny celebrated 8 years sober, I was there at his Thursday meeting. When the cooling system died in July and productivity tanked 30%, I understood it wasn't laziness. People can't function in 100-degree warehouses. Those trucks don't load themselves, and those workers don't manage themselves either. "Why do you insist on embarrassing us like this?" Gregory asked one evening at dinner, examining my grease-stained fingernails with disgust, like they were covered in something contagious. No amount of scrubbing could ever completely remove the grease embedded under my nails. "Trevor's about to graduate from Harvard Business School while you're content being a common laborer. It's humiliating for the family. Someone needs to understand how the business actually operates," I replied, cutting my steak harder than necessary, the knife scraping against the fine china. "Those trucks don't load themselves. Those workers need real leadership, not just theory." Trevor laughed that easy, confident laugh of someone who'd never had to prove their worth a single day in their life. He adjusted his Rolex, Gregory's gift for getting into Harvard, making sure the gold caught the candlelight. "That's what we hire people for, little brother. Leaders don't need to get their hands dirty. They need vision, strategy, the ability to see the big picture. Hard to have vision when you've never looked at the details, I shot back, meeting his eyes across the table. Hard to see the big picture when you've never examined what makes it work. Catherine's fork clinked sharply against her plate, the sound like a judge's gavel. Marcus, please, let's not ruin dinner with your warehouse philosophy. Trevor's professor says he has the finest strategic mind in his entire cohort, the best he's seen in 15 years. Of course he did. Trevor's professors had been saying he was exceptional since pre-kindergarten. When he finger-painted a blob Catherine swore resembled a monastery. Meanwhile, I could rebuild diesel engines blindfolded and manage 50 union workers without a single grievance. But that wasn't the kind of talent they framed for the gallery wall. The graduation invitation arrived by courier on a Tuesday, delivered like it was a court summons. The envelope was heavier than my monthly bills combined, made from paper that felt like fabric and money had a baby together. Inside, the invitation was embossed with gold lettering that probably cost more than most people spent on their actual weddings. The Bennett family cordially invites you to celebrate Trevor Gregory Bennett's graduation from Harvard Business School. My name wasn't listed as a host, just lumped with general admission, like a distant cousin instead of his brother. I'd stood in that Newark warehouse surrounded by the real machinery of our family fortune, holding that invitation while Carlos, one of the forklift operators, asked if everything was okay. Family thing, I told him, and he nodded with the understanding of a man who knew that family could cut deeper than any workplace injury. I drove myself to Harvard in my 2012 Ford F-150, the one with the dented bumper and an AM-only radio that barely picked up stations. I parked it between a Lamborghini and a Bentley, both probably belonging to kids younger than me who'd never worked a real day in their lives. My off-the-rack Macy's suit was the same navy one I wore to every family function where my presence was required but unwanted. Nothing special. Just like me according to everyone who mattered. The usher looked at my invitation twice, apparently shocked a Bennett would arrive alone and underdressed. He seated me in the back row, so far from the stage I could barely make out the podium. I might as well have been watching from the parking lot. My parents occupied front row seats reserved for families who donated entire buildings, not just tuition checks. Catherine wore a St. John suit that cost more than my 6-month salary. Gregory's cufflinks caught the light like tiny stars, each one worth a car payment. I should have left right then. Should have recognized this for what it was, not just a graduation, but a public execution of any hope I had left of mattering to my family. But I stayed. I stayed because somewhere deep in my chest, buried under years of disappointment, was a stupid, stubborn spark of hope that maybe, just maybe, they'd remember I existed. The ceremony dragged on with Latin phrases nobody understood, but everyone pretended to appreciate. Honorary degrees were handed out to billionaires who probably hadn't read a book since the last time they bought their way onto a bestseller list. Then finally, after what felt like hours of pompous speeches, Trevor walked across that stage. Catherine actually stood up and applauded, her Cartier bracelet flashing as she clapped. Gregory's chest swelled with the kind of pride I'd only seen when he closed multi-million-dollar deals. The dean shook Trevor's hand like he was greeting a future president. After the ceremony, we moved to the grand ballroom for the reception. Crystal chandeliers hung from a ceiling painted with Renaissance-style murals, and waiters in white gloves circulated with champagne that cost more per bottle than most people's car payments. I grabbed a glass and found a corner where I could watch the show unfold like I'd learned to do over 28 years of being invisible. Trevor worked the room like a seasoned politician, shaking hands and accepting congratulations with practiced ease. Then Gregory clinked his champagne glass with a gold pen, the sound cutting through the chatter like a bell. Sterling Bennett didn't need to ask for attention. He commanded it simply by existing in a space. "Ladies and gentlemen, if I could have a moment," he began, his voice carrying the authority of a man who'd never been interrupted. "Today isn't just about celebrating Trevor's Harvard degree, though that alone would be worth all this fuss." Polite laughter rippled through the crowd. "Today is about the future. The future of Bennett Shipping International, a company my father built from nothing, and that I've expanded into an $85 million enterprise." My stomach dropped. I knew exactly where this was going. "It gives me tremendous pleasure to announce that Trevor will inherit everything." He paused for dramatic effect, his eyes scanning the crowd, but never finding mine. "The company in its entirety, our vintage car collection of 12 vehicles, including the 1967 Shelby Cobra that once belonged to Steve McQueen, Our Manhattan penthouse overlooking Central Park West, the house in the Hamptons where we summer, and yes, even the Connecticut estate where both boys grew up. Both boys. That's how he acknowledged me. Nameless afterthought. Trevor by name, me as a footnote. Gregory raised his glass higher, and the room erupted in applause. Business partners rushed forward to shake Trevor's hand. Catherine kissed his cheek, leaving a lipstick mark she immediately wiped away with her thumb in that motherly gesture I'd seen 1,000 times directed at Trevor, but never experienced myself. Photographers captured the moment, camera flashes creating a strobe effect that made everything feel surreal. And I sat there, invisible as always, holding a glass of champagne that suddenly tasted like battery acid, mixed with disappointment. Nothing, I whispered to myself. 28 years of loyalty, of work, of trying, and I get absolutely nothing. That's when I saw her cutting through the crowd. She moved through the assembly with purpose that made everyone else seem stationary. Navy dress, understated elegance, silver hair pulled back efficiently. Her hazel eyes locked onto mine from across the room, and she walked straight toward me like a guided missile. The crowd seemed to part for her without realizing they were doing it. She stopped directly in front of me, close enough I could smell expensive but subtle perfume. Marcus Bennett? Yes, I replied, confused. Why did this stranger know my name when half the people in this room probably didn't? She placed a thick manila folder in my hands with deliberate motion that suggested this was more than just paperwork. The folder was heavy, weighted with secrets. Your mother has been lying to you for 28 years, she said, her voice carrying a slight accent that might have been Spanish or Italian. They don't know who your real father is. What are you talking about? My voice cracked, the champagne glass trembling in my other hand. She leaned closer, her hazel eyes never leaving mine. Open it when you're alone. Everything you believed about yourself is wrong. Your real inheritance isn't in this room full of peacocks pretending to be eagles. It's waiting for you in Miami. Your real family sends their regards. Who are you? I managed to ask. Someone who's been waiting 28 years to deliver that folder, she said over her shoulder. Your real family sends their regards. Then she vanished into the crowd, leaving me holding what felt like either destruction or salvation. Around me, the party continued like nothing had happened. Trevor was posing for photos with the dean. Catherine was telling someone about renovation plans for the Hamptons house. Gregory was discussing stock portfolios with his golf buddies. And I stood there, invisible as always, but now holding something that would make them all see me clearly for the first time. I left the reception immediately, walking past the valet station where teenagers juggled keys to cars worth more than houses. My beat-up F-150 sat among gleaming luxury vehicles like a rust-spotted thumb. I climbed in, locked the doors, and turned on the dome light that flickered twice before staying on. My hands shook as I opened the folder. The first document was a DNA test from 2003, the paper slightly yellowed, but the words crystal clear. I read the conclusion 3 times before my brain accepted it. Probability of paternity between Gregory Bennett and Marcus Bennett, 0%. 0%. Absolutely no chance. The man who'd spent 28 years disappointed in me wasn't even my father. Next was a photograph of Catherine, young and radiant in a way I'd never seen her, standing on Miami Beach next to a man who looked like me in 20 years. Same dark eyes, same strong jaw, same broad shoulders that had always made me look different from Trevor's lean build. The man had his arm around Catherine's waist, and she was looking at him with an expression I'd never seen her give Gregory. Written on back in faded blue ink, Catherine and Eduardo, Miami Beach, 2002. Then a legal filing from Miami-Dade County Probate Court. Eduardo Castellano, Cuban-American shipping magnate, had died 3 months ago. His will, properly witnessed and notarized, contained a section highlighted in yellow. To my biological son, Marcus, whom I was never allowed to meet but have watched from afar his entire life, I leave my entire estate including Castellano Global Holdings, all associated properties and personal assets totaling approximately $450 million. $450 million. I read that number again. That wasn't a typo. The warehouse supervisor, who couldn't afford a new truck, was apparently heir to nearly $500 million. But the final page was what broke me completely. A letter in Catherine's handwriting, that same elegant script that had signed cold birthday cards with just her signature, no love preceding it. Eduardo, Gregory can never know about that night. He's sterile from his racing accident at Yale, though he doesn't know it yet. The doctors told me privately when we were trying to conceive. I'm pregnant with your child, but this baby will be raised as a Bennett. The Bennett name opens doors your money never could. Don't contact me again. Your money means nothing compared to the social standing Gregory provides. The child will have everything that matters. Vivian. Everything that matters. Apparently that didn't include truth or a father who wanted me. My phone rang, Catherine's classical ringtone. I stared at her name on the screen, then answered. "Where are you?" she demanded, voice sharp with irritation. "Your father's about to give his second toast. It's rude to leave during your brother's celebration." "He's not my father," I said quietly, each word deliberate. "Miami Beach, 2002, Eduardo Castellano. Ring any bells, mother?" The silence stretched so long I thought the call had dropped. Then, barely a whisper, "What did you just say? Or should I just read you this letter? The one where you admit Gregory is sterile? The one where you tell Eduardo to stay away because his money means nothing compared to Bennett's social standing?" The line went dead. She'd hung up. 28 years of lies, and she couldn't even give me an explanation. I sat in that truck for another 10 minutes, staring at the documents spread across my passenger seat. My entire life had been built on a foundation of lies. Every dismissive comment from Gregory made sense now. Some part of him must have sensed I wasn't his. Every cold glance from Catherine was guilt, disguised as disappointment. She'd looked at me every day and seen her secret, her mistake, her compromise for social status. But Eduardo Castellano had known. He'd known and waited, building an empire that dwarfed the Bennett's efforts and leaving it all to the son he'd never been allowed to claim. I made my decision right there in that parking lot. I drove straight to Logan Airport, bought a one-way ticket to Miami using my emergency credit card. If finding out your entire life was a lie didn't qualify as an emergency, nothing would. "Any bags to check?" the attendant asked. "No," I replied. "I'm leaving everything behind." I had no clothes except what I was wearing. No plan except discovering who Eduardo Castellano was. As I waited at the gate, my phone exploded with messages. 17 missed calls from Catherine, 14 from Gregory, texts from Trevor ranging from confusion to anger. "Where are you? Mom's having a breakdown. Dad's screaming at everyone. What did you do?" I turned off my phone and boarded the plane. For the first time in my life, I wasn't running away from something. I was running toward it. Toward a father who'd wanted me. Toward an inheritance that was actually mine. Toward truth that would destroy the Bennett's carefully constructed world. The Castellano Global Holdings building in downtown Miami made Bennett Shipping look like a lemonade stand. 42 floors of black glass and steel rose into the Florida sky. The lobby alone could have swallowed the entire Bennett Shipping headquarters, with marble floors so polished I could see my nervous reflection. Security guards in expensive suits nodded as I approached, like they'd been expecting me. Isabella Castellano met me in the executive boardroom on the 42nd floor. The room had floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Biscayne Bay, where massive cargo ships moved in and out of port like choreographed dancers. She stood with her back to me initially, watching the ships, then turned with that same purposeful grace I'd seen at Harvard. "I'm your aunt," she said simply. "Eduardo was my brother." She gestured to a leather chair that probably cost more than I made in a month. I sat, trying to process that this elegant woman was my family, my real family. She pulled up a presentation on a wall screen that materialized from what I'd thought was just a black wall. "Your father built a shipping empire that makes the Bennetts look like small-time operators. We move cargo through every major port from Miami to Rio de Janeiro. Castellano Global has contracts with governments, not just corporations. We don't just ship products, we move economies." The numbers on screen made my head spin. Annual revenue in the billions. Fleet sizes that dwarfed Bennett's boutique operation. Political connections reaching into the White House. "The company's worth $450 million in liquid assets alone," she continued. "But real value is in contracts and connections. Your father spent 28 years building something that couldn't be ignored, just like his son." She handed me another folder, this one bound in leather with my name embossed in gold. "Marcus Castellano. Eduardo knew about you from the beginning. Your mother thought she was clever, but Eduardo had his own DNA test done when you were 2. A strand of your hair from a barber shop. He's been watching your entire life." She showed me surveillance photos that made my blood run cold and warm simultaneously. Me at high school graduation looking lost. Loading trucks at the warehouse, laughing with Carlos and the guys. One from last Christmas dinner at the Bennett estate where I sat at the far end like an exile. In every photo, someone had been watching, caring enough to document these moments. "Why didn't he contact me?" My voice cracked. "Your mother threatened to destroy him if he tried. She had connections through Gregory, political leverage that could have made business difficult. But more than that, Eduardo was smart. He knew Gregory was sterile from the beginning, found out through a private investigator who accessed medical records from Gregory's racing accident at Yale. Wait, if Gregory's sterile, how did Catherine explain Trevor? Isabella's smile was sharp as glass. That's the beautiful part. Trevor isn't Gregory's son either. Your mother had an affair with Gregory's business partner, Harrison Mitchell, 18 months before you were born. That's why Trevor got everything. Catherine had to keep Gregory happy and distracted, or he might start asking questions about why his sons look nothing like him. Harrison Mitchell. Uncle Harrison, who'd always been around, always paid special attention to Trevor, always looked at him with pride beyond normal interest. It all made horrible, perfect sense. But here's the truly beautiful part, Isabella continued, pulling up legal documents. The Bennett fortune is built on contracts with Castellano Global. 75% of their shipping routes run through our ports. 85% of their international contracts are partnerships with our subsidiaries. And every contract has a clause Gregory never read carefully. They can be terminated with 30 days' notice if the company is run by someone who isn't a biological Bennett. But Trevor isn't a biological Bennett, I said slowly, implications hitting like physical force. Exactly. The moment Trevor takes over, we can pull every contract. Bennett shipping will collapse within 6 months, probably 3. My phone buzzed with frantic texts from Trevor. What did you do? Dad's having a breakdown. Mom locked herself in her room. The lawyers are here. Isabella placed a Mont Blanc pen in front of me, heavier than seemed possible for something so small. Sign here, and you become CEO of Castellano Global. Your birthright. Everything Eduardo built, he built for you. I thought about 28 years being called useless, watching Trevor get praised for breathing while I worked until my hands bled and still wasn't enough. I thought about Catherine choosing status over truth, Gregory's dismissive looks, the back row at Harvard, the nothing I was supposed to inherit while Trevor got everything. I signed my name, Marcus Castellano. Isabella handed me one more envelope. Eduardo left you a letter. He wrote it a week before he died, when cancer had spread too far to fight. I opened it with trembling hands. My son, I've waited your entire life to give you what was always yours. I watched you build character in that warehouse while your brother built ego at Harvard. You learned the value of hard work while he learned entitlement. You became a man despite them, not because of them. I'm sorry I couldn't be there, but I made sure you'd have everything in the end. Blood doesn't make family, but it does make heirs. Welcome home. Your real father, Eduardo. I read it 3 times, memorizing every word, every loop of handwriting. This stranger, this man I'd never met, had been more of a father in death than Gregory had been in life. 3 weeks later, I stood in my new office overlooking Miami Harbor, watching Castellano ships move in and out of port like chess pieces. Morning sun painted the water gold, and I could see our logo on everything from massive container vessels to trucks loading at the docks below. My secretary knocked professionally. Mr. Castellano, your visitors are here. I'd been expecting them. Send them in. Gregory and Catherine Bennett walked in looking like they'd aged 10 years in 3 weeks. Catherine's perfect makeup couldn't hide the dark circles. Gregory's silver hair seemed thinner, his powerful presence diminished like air leaking from a balloon. They stood in my office, taking in the obvious wealth and power, and I saw the exact moment they realized their son, their failure, their disappointment, now held their fate in his hands. Marcus, Gregory started, his voice broken like I'd never heard it. We need those contracts, please. No, I said simply, turning from the window. You need those contracts. I don't need anything from you anymore. Catherine's perfect composure finally cracked like expensive china hitting concrete. I did what I thought was best. The Bennett name meant everything. You have to understand the opportunities it provided. It meant everything to you. To me, it meant nothing but pain, rejection, and 28 years being told I wasn't good enough for a name that wasn't even mine to begin with. Please, Gregory begged, and I'd never seen him beg for anything. Trevor doesn't know. He doesn't deserve to lose everything because of our mistakes. I thought about that for a moment, really considered it. Trevor, despite being the golden child, had never been intentionally cruel. He'd been oblivious, privileged, dismissive, but not cruel. He was a victim too, raised believing a lie just like me. "I'll make you a deal," I said, moving behind my desk, power dynamic clear. "I'll keep the contracts for 1 year. In that time, Trevor needs to work in your warehouses. Real work. Loading trucks, handling inventory, learning the actual business from the ground up. No special treatment, no shortcuts, no executive fast track. He punches a clock like everyone else. If he lasts the full year without quitting, if he actually learns what I learned, I'll extend the contracts. If he quits, or you intervene to make it easier, I pull everything immediately." They exchanged glances. 28 years of marriage, compressed into one look of defeat. "He won't last a month," Gregory said quietly. "Then you better hope he inherited more from Harrison Mitchell than just his eyes," I replied, watching the final truth hit them. Catherine gasped. "You know about Harrison?" "I know everything. Eduardo was very thorough. Did you think you were the only one who could keep secrets? The difference is, Eduardo's secrets were waiting to set me free. Yours were chains keeping everyone prisoner." They had no choice but to agree. As they turned to leave, Catherine stopped at the door. "Do you hate us?" she asked, without turning around. "No," I said honestly. "Hate would mean you still have power over me. You're just strangers who happened to raise me." The last time I saw Trevor, he was wearing work boots and a uniform with trainee stitched on the pocket, standing in the same Newark warehouse where I'd spent 3 years. His soft hands were already blistering from the work, sweat staining his collar by noon. But for the first time in our lives, he looked at me with something approaching respect, maybe even understanding. "You knew, didn't you?" he asked during lunch break, sitting on the same loading dock where I used to eat with Carlos and the guys. "This whole time, you knew you'd win in the end." "No," I admitted, handing him a bottle of water. "I just knew that being called useless was better than being useless. Every insult, every dismissal, every time they celebrated you while ignoring me, it was all building something they never expected. Strength, real strength. Not the kind you buy with money or inherit with a name." He nodded slowly, looking at his blistered hands. "Maybe it's my turn to build some. Maybe it is." Isabella was right about one thing. Blood doesn't make you family, but it does determine inheritance. The Bennetts gave Trevor everything they had to give: money, status, hollow praise, and a lie he'd have to live with forever. But Eduardo Castellano, a man I never met, gave me something worth more. He gave me truth, purpose, and knowledge that I was wanted, watched over, and worthy even when no one else believed it. The warehouse supervisor, who was called useless, now controls one of the largest shipping empires in the Americas. The golden boy works the loading dock, learning what sweat equity really means. And the parents who played God with their children's lives discovered that karma keeps perfect records and always collects its debts with interest. Sometimes the best inheritance isn't what someone gives you. It's what you become when they give you nothing at all. Every slight becomes strength. Every dismissal becomes determination. And every moment you're made to feel worthless becomes fuel for the fire that eventually burns down their house of lies. Every morning when I sit in my Miami office watching sunrise paint the Atlantic in shades of gold and possibility, I read Eduardo's letter one more time. Not for the money or the power, but for 5 words I waited 28 years to hear. "Welcome home, my real son." Those words mean more than $450 million. They mean more than 42 floors of glass and steel. They mean that somewhere someone saw my worth when everyone else saw waste. Someone believed in me when I was trained not to believe in myself. Someone loved me enough to wait, to watch, and to ensure that truth would eventually win. The Bennetts taught me how to survive neglect. Eduardo Castellano made sure I'd thrive because of it. And that's the greatest inheritance of all, knowing that sometimes the family that throws you away is just clearing the path for the family that's waiting to claim you.